On December 2nd of 2021, I had an episode here on the podcast called World War III, the Cold War Never Ended. And you know, when people say like, oh, I hate to say I told you so, like that's kind of one of these moments. Don't get me wrong, I was very wrong with a lot of what I said in that episode. But for the most part, I was on the right track. The order in which events played out, who was doing what in what order, yeah, I was wrong. But unless you've had your head in the sand over the last 24, 48 hours, and you have no idea what I'm talking about or what I'm referencing, Russia did it. Russia invaded, and that's an understatement, invaded the Ukraine. This episode's really going to be kind of my reaction. We're just no filters here. We're going to here's how I'm feeling about it. Okay. I will just give you my emotions towards all of this. I'm super annoyed. I'm angry. I'm disgusted and frustrated, I would say. Frustrated because I actually do think that this could have been avoided. Angry because it could have been avoided. Annoyed because it could have been like, okay. I wrote down some things that I wanted to talk about for this episode, and I have 4 questions on here and then 3 topics, right? So I have who's to blame, how did this happen, what will Putin do and why, and then how is this going to end? And then my 3 topics that I have are sanctions, USSR, and my thoughts are with or prayers to Ukraine. Okay, so we've got our subject matter, we've got our topic for this episode. Forgive me if I go all over the place with it, but I was thinking of like, okay, maybe I'll write down like bullet points and I'll talk about them in this order, or I'll do like maybe write a script or an intro. And as much as I actually do like doing that, because I think it, especially to start out an episode, it's kind of nice. I think it sounds a lot better. That's literally what I did with the World War III episode. But you know, I just sat here and I'm like, okay, I've had, I don't know, 12 hours roughly to process it, and I'm just super annoyed. So, yeah, okay. Anyway, so I woke up I think it was in the middle of the night. I think I was asleep in bed, and I was woken up and informed that, yeah, Putin invaded Russia. And honestly, I was just like, yeah, we know, like, Russia's been invading Ukraine, like, okay. And then I was informed even more, no, like he lost his mind and he is invading the entire country. So let me just say this. 2014, when he did it with Crimea, I was in college, I was dumbfounded. I was like, I can't believe in this day and age, you can just literally just go take part of a country and that's it. Well, and granted, at that time, I was like super uneducated on like geopolitics and just like international relations in general. And I'm definitely not going to say that by any means I'm like super well educated on this, but from that time on, like, I think my perspective has been opened even more. But my roaming thought on this is Russia was going to take parts of Ukraine, but I was way wrong thinking that they weren't going to take the whole thing. So here's how I think about it. A couple days ago, we had these 2 quote breakaway regions within Ukraine, and Russia like ruffled tons of international feathers by saying like, oh yeah, we recognize that these 2 regions are sovereign, and you know we'll we view them as independent, right? And everybody got mad because they're saying, oh, well, this goes against international law. You can't do this. And really, let's get real. Regardless of the validity behind these two regions, other countries were upset about that, not because they actually cared about Ukraine. And again, this is all my opinion, so disagree if you want. It is what it is. This is my podcast, so whatever. But international community basically condemned Russia for saying, like, yeah, we recognize their sovereignty, their independence. That was only because they're afraid that if another country like Russia gives recognition to these breakaway regions, that it can happen to any other country, okay? i.e. US, Spain, UK, okay? Just to name a couple. But like, let's not get that twisted, okay? International community condemned that because, yes, it may go against international law, but it's just because they don't want to lose parts of their own countries, okay? It had nothing to do with Ukraine. Secondly, it's so much, it's crazy how much can change just in like a day or 2 or 3 days span, because when that happened, I was just sitting back and I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, I'm not surprised one bit, because what's going to happen is it's going to be Crimea part 2 and 3. Like, Russia is just going to say, hey, great, you guys are independent, awesome. But in all reality, we know that it's just going to basically be a Russian satellite, okay? And so this whole time, my thought process has been, that's what's going to happen. It's going to die down. And then we're just going to see another chunk of the Ukraine taken out of itself and absorbed by Russia. All right. What I didn't expect was for them to go so far as just saying they're going to take the whole country. Now, after having a little bit of time to process this does not surprise me at all. Okay. Because now what's going to happen is, when this started today, the invasion, all these countries come out and say, we condemn these actions. This is unforgivable. This is wrong. Are we 6 years old? Like, we don't actually need to go out and say, this is wrong. We condemn these acts. No, duh. We condemn these actions, right? Like, if you are decision makers, have a leadership role in a government, you got to do more than that, okay? And here's the best part of it. Aside from just condemning what Russia's doing, countries have put sanctions on Russia now. Ooh, okay? Let me cross this one off my list, because sanctions, I have this on here. Sanctions are nothing. Like, I'm really going to give you guys my opinion on this episode with a lot. Here we go. Sanctions are a complete joke, because sanctions are to deter a government, a country, an entity, decision makers from doing something, right? Sanctions are preventative measures to try to keep somebody from doing something, okay? The time to put sanctions on Russia has come and gone. Like, that's not what's going to stop him, okay? Him being Putin, all right? Sanctions don't matter. Like, you can put sanctions. I'm blown away that the sanctions Putin doesn't care about the sanctions, okay? In an authoritarian government, deep down, day to day, the decision maker is not going to really care who's suffering, right? Because we know he's not going to be suffering. So if the whole strategy is like, oh, we're going to put sanctions on Russia, and that way it's going to affect Russians' day-to-day life, and no, it doesn't matter, okay? And again, even if it did, the time to do it has already passed, okay? Sanctions are a joke, okay? Let me try to keep a little bit of a timeline, or of a, I guess, order to this. All right, who's to blame? Who's to blame for the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Easy answer, right? If you don't know any better, you're gonna say, oh, it's Putin for sure. Feel free to disagree with me here. I think it's all the Western countries. I genuinely think it's the Western countries' fault that this happened. And here's why. We've essentially been provoking this since like back before I made that World War III episode, right? We've been saying since Thanksgiving, by we, I mean like intelligence agencies in the West, i.e. US, UK, etc. We've been saying, oh, they're going to attack in a week, they're going to invade in a week. And so not only have we been basically putting that information out there over and over again, and we already know my opinions on intelligence reports, right? Because, you know, they assured us that the Taliban would not, it would be impossible for them to take Kabul and have basically complete power over Afghanistan. That would not happen. And then it happened in like, what, a few days, couple weeks. So when intelligence reports come out or a country says, oh, we have intelligence that this X, Y, and Z is going to happen, you already lost me, because credibility goes out the window when you have such a debacle that happened in Afghanistan as what did. But I digress. We pushed the narrative, right? We pushed the narrative that it was going to happen. You know, if you embrace manifestation, we manifested that was going to happen, right? But in addition to that, we just kept poking the bear. Okay, we kept sending troops, not troops, sorry. Well, there were troops there already. We kept sending supplies, ammo, weaponry, money. Like, think about it in just the most basic sense, right? I have a home, and let's literally go with the most basic, like bare bones society, right? I have a little plot of land and I build a house on it. And then I build a fence around my land. And a neighbor comes and moves in the next day. And they start, I don't know, putting up cannons, right? A lot of cannons, like 5 cannons. There's 6 cannons, okay? And then 25 cannons later, again, this is all hypothetical, those 25 cannons are right on the other side of my fence. How would you feel? Okay, I'm not justifying this, but I'm just trying to showcase we have to look at everything from both perspectives. It doesn't matter what level of severity we're talking about with anything. You have to look at all sides of the story. So think about it in this sense. I have my home, I have my hut, I have my fenced in yard. Right next door, I've got my neighbor, and he's got 25 cannons just right there on the other side of my fence. Am I going to feel safe? That's what you ask yourself. Am I going to feel safe? No. Okay. Now let's look at the Russian side of it. Okay. Everybody outside of Russia is saying they're going to do this, they're going to come, they're going to start this war, they're going to start invading, they're going to attack, da, 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 da. And I'm not saying like whether the intelligence was right or not. It clearly wasn't 100% right, because back in December, they said, oh, they're going to do it next week, right? And so now here we are, February 24th, and it happened. But what I'm saying is, you add the narrative being pushed in the media, the narrative being pushed by world leaders, and then you add the fact that we are, and when I say we now, I'm talking about Western countries, okay? Then the Western countries are just moving stuff in to Ukraine, more and more stuff. And yes, you can play both sides of the argument and say, well, you know, it's for defensive purposes in case Russia does. Okay, just follow me though. We've been pushing the agenda. Government leaders are not doing anything really to de-escalate it. And then we've just got more and more stuff that we're sending into the country. On the Russian side, you can look at it as, okay, well, you know, this doesn't make us feel good, We've got our neighbor that we share a border with, and they are loading up on weapons. And who's to say they didn't feel as if, you know, it was going to be the opposite, right? Where, let's just hypothetically say Ukraine, maybe they thought, oh, Ukraine's going to come over. Again, it's a little irrelevant because Russian army versus Ukraine army, but still, the fact of the matter is, if you have somebody, and again, think of it back to this example of having your own little hut with your fenced in yard, your neighbor's building up the troops or the cannons, right? Add in the fact that where are those cannons coming from? All of your other neighbors, the guy that lives down the street, the guy 2 blocks down the road, right? They're the ones that are giving my neighbor all of these weapons. So how is that going to make me feel? Probably not too good. All right. Again, I am not justifying anything at all. Okay. It's annoying that I have to say like, oh, I'm proud to be an American, whatever. But with the question, who's to blame? I'm going to put it on Western countries. Okay. For those reasons, as well as the fact that we could have done a much better job having meaningful dialogue. Okay, diplomacy, right? That's what government leaders are supposed to do, right? Like it was so annoying watching this play out when you had leaders of other countries talking to each other, and it was like by third party that they would then relay a message to who it was intended for, right? So we had like US and UK, we were condemning what Russia was doing. Like this was a month ago, let's just say, okay, before what took place. And they're saying we need to come together. We need to have some meetings to see how we're going to handle this. And then on the other side, you have like President Macron from France speaking directly with Putin from Russia. And like, why did we not at any point have direct mediation, right? I don't even know. I think there was one time where President Zelensky of Ukraine and Putin had some type of meeting or dialogue or something. I believe maybe it wasn't Putin directly, but like, why was that not the priority? And why was that not what, like every time there were going to be countries discussing something, it should be Ukraine, Russia, they are there. And then yes, you can have other countries mediate. All right. So I think, like I said, who's to blame? At the end of the day, yes, we all know it's Putin. It was his decision, but I'm going to say it was the Western countries were to blame. Okay. How did it happen? How did this happen? Honestly, I think this happened because Putin saw how much he can get away with, right? I think these 2 breakaway regions in the Ukraine were like a test run, right? So again, if you listen back into that episode from December that we had, I basically talked about how like, in my opinion, the Cold War never ended. And you have countries like China and Russia that have had such a long-term vision as opposed to countries like America, which we have a 4-year vision, okay, via the elections. Like that's as far as we can look into the future, right? Because we're so worried about president and, you know, societal division and all this stuff, where these countries look more long-term. And so in terms of how did it happen, and it's crazy because Putin's come out and said like he basically wants a reunification of the Soviet Union, which is wild because I just sit back and I'm like, okay, again, it's not something I want to say that I was right with, but my head was there. And so how did it happen? Crimea back in 2014 was a very good test run. And then administrations changed, obviously, not in Russia, of course, but fast forward to recently, and you had these 2 regions in the Ukraine, which were apparently separatist held. Again, whether it's Russian agents or it's genuine Ukrainian citizens that, you know, just wanted to be a part of Russia, that's not the point. The point is, it was how that was handled, right? And so essentially seeing that this could happen, these 2 breakaway regions take action. Russia comes in, says, we recognize you. All these other countries say, wow, that's bad. You can't do that. We're condemning that you're doing this, that you're recognizing these countries. Okay. It just kind of gave him a bit of a taste, and then it continued, right? The West continued with this, pushing the narrative of, oh, there's going to be a false flag war, false flag operation on the Russian end, and that's, that would be reason enough for us to start combat, right? Well, he saw this play out, and I think a couple things. He already knew that the eastern portion of Ukraine was as good as Crimea for Russia, right? Then he saw the lack of actual like meaningful response to that in the form of like, okay, we're going to put some sanctions on them. And I also think like there's probably a little bit of just sheer annoyance and fed up with and craziness with, handling the narrative that had been being pushed. So how did it happen? I think it was a mix of, he kind of snapped. He was also annoyed. I feel like he probably didn't think the Western countries were taking him as serious as he meant it to be. And whatever his, I don't want to say demands, but, there were negotiations in how this was going to be prevented. And I would love to know like what both sides were wanting in order to come to an agreement. But next one I have here is, what will Putin do and why? What will Putin do and why? Here's my thought. So he's said that he wants basically Soviet Union Part 2. I think what's going to happen is, again, after the absolute embarrassment of a response that's come from Western countries, I think Putin's going to take Ukraine, and that's wild to say, but I think he'll take Ukraine. And why? Because Western countries are not going to send troops, and it's as simple as that. And if you do the math, Russia's got the troops to do it. And there's going to be, and I'm going to cross out my USSR here because I basically addressed that already. There's going to be the nuclear facilities in Ukraine. And, at the time of this recording, like, Russia has gotten control of Chernobyl, and that's super strategic, because essentially what you can say if you're Russia, now that you control it, is, hey, do what we say, or else we're going to just blow the top off this, and here's a nice nuclear dust cloud. Okay. So what's Putin going to do? He's going to take Ukraine because nobody else is going to send troops in. Yeah, we're going to send money. Yeah, we're going to send supplies, materials, what have you. But I don't know. I think that's what's going to happen. I think he's going to take Ukraine. How is it going to end? How will this end? It's going to end after he takes Ukraine. And here's my thoughts on this. Like, it's not so much that he's going to take Ukraine, but it's that Western countries are going to sacrifice Ukraine. And it's like disgusting to even say it, but that's honestly my thought on it. Like, Ukraine's not part of NATO. They're not part of the EU. And unfortunately, that's when it will matter, is when Russia tries to step foot into a NATO country. And because, Article 5 of that agreement basically says an attack on one is an attack on all. And Putin knows it, and the Western countries, I think, know it, and they're not going to admit it. But Putin, little by little, he's seeing how much he can get, and he knows that the buffet stops at the border. And I don't know, it's extremely annoying. Like I said, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, I'm disgusted. And it's not like I'm disgusted, yes, with Russia, but I'm also disgusted with like Western countries, because like it's like just straight up like turning your back on a country. And it's super, I mean, I don't know. I'm having a hard time finding the words for it, but and then on Twitter, people are, saying thoughts and prayers go out to Ukraine. I stand with Ukraine. Like, that's great, you guys. But honestly, I find that so annoying too, because like, in my opinion, if you want to put something on there, like, and you can look at my Twitter here, I'll pull it up. I'll pull up my Twitter here. Like, you can criticize me too, because I mean, you can see what I have on there. But like, to me, don't do the standing with Ukraine, or our thoughts are with Ukraine, or prayers to Ukraine. You guys, like, maybe, I guess I can't say because I don't know. But if it were me and I would, be on Twitter, if I'm Ukrainian and I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw, tons of people, hashtag stand with Ukraine and all this, like, I would think, like, again, I don't know, but in my head, I would not be, to me, that wouldn't mean anything. What would mean something to me is if people were posting, retweeting videos or accounts of people that were actually there and that are experiencing it, and spreading the awareness of what exactly is going on in real time. Because in this day and age, that's one of the things that, like, especially like any country, it tries to push their own agenda and their own propaganda. And the more that you can spread the word of really what is happening in real time, I think that does a much more, it does much more for the people that are affected by it, than just saying that you stand with them and you're thinking of them, or you're praying for them. Like, okay, again, yeah, prayers are great and all, but for these government leaders and these ambassadors and these diplomats and these politicians to tweet that stuff out, like prayers to Ukraine, like, I think it's such a slap in the face. You're the people that can make change. You're the people that can actually influence what is going on there and make an impact and save people. But you're just going to save your own face and tweet thoughts and prayers go out to Ukraine. Like, or I condemn what Russia's doing. Duh. Yes, obviously. Thank you for stating the obvious. What Russia's doing is horrible. It's disgusting. It's literally mind-blowing. And of course, you want to pray for it. If you want to pray for a country, you want to pray for their people, that's great. Okay. To me, maybe it's just religion should be between you and your God, and you don't have to broadcast it to the world, right? I don't know. Like I said, my tweets, let me just see. I'm just looking back at my own tweets. And again, like I said, criticize me all you want. Like, that's totally fair. I know that I, say one thing and maybe it shows another. Okay, so here's this. Yesterday, no, that wasn't even related to that. 9 hours ago, I said sanctions mean nothing. Because to me, they don't. I really don't see the purpose of them. 8 hours ago, I said thoughts and prayers are great, but I won't do anything. followed it up with, instead of that, maybe declare how inhumane, unjustified, and barbaric these actions are. And I was talking mainly to like, just again, saying, talk about the actions, right? Individuals on social media, spread the news, events, the stories of what is going on from people that are experiencing it firsthand. Get the word out. The more eyes that can see what is actually happening, that's called getting educated, right? Thoughts and prayers, great. You read that and you're like, oh, geez, something must be going on in Ukraine. That sucks. And maybe I'm biased because I'm in Poland and like, I don't know. I'm just super, super annoyed. Governments, decision makers, and leaders take action. Like, is that too much to ask, right? Really annoying how the whole world is turning their backs on Ukraine. And the most recent tweet an hour ago is a meme, just like a hand sticking it. For those of you that aren't watching the video of this, hand reaching out of the water, and it just says Ukraine. And then there's a hand about to embrace the Ukraine hand, and it's NATO. And then NATO gives the Ukrainian hand a high five and says, we condemn this move by Putin, and the Ukrainian hand sinks. And that's pretty good sum up of my frustrations with all of this. You know, President Zelensky, Ukraine's under martial law now. He signed a bill into law that any man between the ages of 18 and 60 cannot leave Ukraine now. He said anybody that wants a gun will be provided a gun. It's just disgusting. But I've rambled on, I'm sure, plenty. I don't know. Like I said, it's easy to sit and talk about it. But again, it's my podcast, right? The roaming thoughts. This is my roaming thought. You know, I guess you could call me a hypocrite if you want, but those are my thoughts. We'll see how it plays out. Just frustrating, just a disappointment, really. Be grateful for what you have.